Recent rumors have surfaced in the Nintendo community about them having at least 2 more Wii U games planned to be ported to the Nintendo Switch. These rumors stem from Emily Rogers, who has been right with some things in the past, but she's also been wrong in the past, so her record is kinda shaky. So whether or not she has good sources on this report, we'll just have to wait and see. But regardless of whether or not the reporting is accurate, I still think it's likely to believe that we're going to be getting more Wii U ports on the Switch, because Nintendo has already done so many of them. The fact that we're in 2020 now and there are still some games from the Wii U that aren't ported over to the Nintendo Switch that were pretty successful and I believe definitely have some potential to succeed even more on the Switch is kinda surprising. So it wouldn't shock me at all to see many of these games come over to Nintendo's newest console. Today I'll be going over 6 of the most commonly shared ideas for Wii U ports to the Nintendo Switch, and trying to determine whether or not they're likely or unlikely to come to the console. Throughout the many ideas that people are throwing out there, I definitely believe some of them have a higher potential to come to the Nintendo Switch than others. Any titles from the Wii U that are still on the console that I don't mention in this video are even far more unlikely to come to the Nintendo Switch, because they're either not that relevant or wouldn't really make sense to be ported over. But these 6 that I'm talking about today are ideas that people are throwing out there. And with that all being said, let's get started. The first title that I want to go over in this video is Super Mario 3D World. This is probably the most common idea that people are sharing for a Wii U port to the Nintendo Switch, and I'm just going to come out right away and say that I think this is very likely to be ported to the console. But why do I think Super Mario 3D World has such a good chance here? Well, it really has to do with many factors surrounding the releases of 3D Mario games on the Nintendo Switch, as well as content included in Super Mario Maker 2. In terms of the 3D Mario situation on the Switch, I've been speculating in the past for the last few videos that since Super Mario Odyssey came out relatively early in the Nintendo Switch's life cycle, and Nintendo probably still wants to get another 3D Mario on the Switch somewhere due to the great sales of Odyssey, 3D World coming over from the Wii U could make a lot of sense. After all, Super Mario 3D World is in a much different style of a 3D Mario game than Super Mario Odyssey is, Odyssey being far more open-ended and more of a single-player geared experience, whereas 3D World is heavily focused on the multiplayer and more of a level-based experience, not so much allowing you to explore in a vast open world. And there are definitely benefits to both styles of 3D Mario. I definitely enjoy them both very much. So if 3D World was to get ported, there would be a nice contrast there. Some people who prefer the level-based style could go play that game, whereas if you don't prefer that level-based style, you could go and play Odyssey. Now, if Nintendo wants to do a sequel to Super Mario Odyssey or a Super Mario Galaxy 3, just a brand new 3D Mario game, then obviously I don't think 3D World could be ported over. But there is more evidence for 3D World to be ported here. In Super Mario Maker 2, a brand new game theme that was introduced for the title was the 3D World game style. This allowed you to create your levels in the style of Super Mario 3D World, but it's in a 2D based form, which is kind of interesting, and I love that Nintendo developed that style for it. But why would Nintendo release a game in 2019 in a style of a game released in 2013? Wouldn't it make more sense to include a Odyssey theme in Super Mario Maker 2? Maybe Nintendo is still planning to include that, but we haven't gotten any information about that recently. There are really no signs as of this moment in time for an Odyssey style to be included in Mario Maker 2, which means that 3D World was the only new game theme introduced that's based on a 3D Mario title. And my only logical reason for why Nintendo would want to promote Super Mario 3D World in 2019 is that they're planning on re-releasing it on the Nintendo Switch, potentially with some new levels added in, as they tend to do with their titles that they port over, like Captain Toad. I could definitely see Super Mario 3D World being very successful financially on the Nintendo Switch as well, which is another reason that supports it. I would still wonder what Nintendo's big holiday release for 2020 would be if 3D World were to release, because that takes away the 3D Mario option for the big holiday title because it's not a brand new release. And I think it's unlikely that a new main series Pokemon game like Diamond and Pearl Remakes comes out this year now, considering that we're getting the downloadable content for Pokemon Sword and Shield. So Pokemon Diamond and Pearl Remakes would likely release next year if they're going to be releasing at all. This leaves a lot of open-endedness for Nintendo's big holiday title for this year, which I think is kind of interesting. Then again, that is only if 3D World comes to the Switch. And there's a lot of reasons supporting it that I just went over, so I am going to say likely on this one. The next title that I see people talking about is Nintendo Land. Nintendo Land is a fun game that released early on for the Wii U, and it was bundled with the console really frequently, so there was a lot of people who got to try it out, in a similar vein to Wii Sports, where a lot of people got to play it because it came with a Wii. Nintendo Land represents many different Nintendo franchises, and you got to play mini games based off of their various series, like Luigi's Mansion, for example, which I remember being a fun multiplayer experience. And it's because of the fun times that many people had playing Nintendo Land that a lot of people are requesting it to be ported over to the Nintendo Switch. That fun that they had, they'd like to replicate it again with a new release on the console, potentially with a little bit new content added in. But right now, I'm gonna come out and say that I think it's unlikely that Nintendo Land gets ported over to the Nintendo Switch, and here's why. Despite it making the top 10 Wii U best-selling games list, Nintendo Land could potentially be financially successful on the Switch, but it heavily relied on the Wii U gamepad for its control scheme, and it's so built into that I feel it wouldn't really transition well over to the Nintendo Switch. Now, we have seen some games that incorporate the Wii U gamepad into their control scheme, like Splatoon and Super Mario Maker, and they both received sequels on the Nintendo Switch that you don't need the gamepad for. So why would Nintendo Land be a different case here? Well, a lot of the Nintendo Land games are built into this gamepad. They're a core integral part in the gameplay, and if you remove the gamepad, then you wouldn't be able to play a lot of these games and have to build a large amount of these games from the ground up. So maybe we'll get a Nintendo Land sequel on the Switch, but in terms of a straight up Nintendo Land port, I don't think it's very likely, unfortunately. The next title that I see Nintendo fans speculating about is whether or not the Wonderful 101 will be ported over to the Nintendo Switch. Some of you may be unaware of what this game is, so I'll explain it really briefly. This game stars Wonder Red, and it's developed by Platinum Games. You get to go around, collect other people to join your team. Eventually you get to 101 people, and the action-based gameplay could be really fun. From the people who have played this game, they seem to really enjoy it. The game got really positive reviews from people who have played it on the Wii U, leading to many of those people demanding a port on the Nintendo Switch, just so that they get to experience it again, potentially with a little bit of new features added in. But I'm gonna come out and say that this game is unlikely to be ported to the Nintendo Switch, purely because of the poor sales, so it might not even be worth the development resources for Nintendo to go and port this game over. I get that one of the main reasons why Nintendo wants to port a game over from the Wii U to the Switch is to make some more money and generate some more sales for a game that they put lots of effort into. This philosophy makes sense from Nintendo's perspective. Let's take a game like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, for example. This is an incredibly great quality of game that obviously took a ton of development resources and money to create. Retro Studios spent a lot of time developing this title, and Nintendo poured a lot of financial resources into it. So when the game didn't sell that well on the Wii U, it was obviously a big disappointment for them. But when you come over and port it to the Nintendo Switch and the game starts blossoming financially for Nintendo, that's a really good thing for them. So you think that philosophy could carry over with a title like The Wonderful 101, but for a game like that, which sold less than 500,000 units, yeah, I don't think it's going to be that likely. Tropical Freeze didn't sell as well as I think Nintendo wanted it to or expected it to, but it at least grossed over 1 million units, and there's a lot of people who played that game. It has Donkey Kong as the main character, which is obviously very iconic. Wonderful 101 doesn't really have that aspect going for it, which I think hinders its likelihood of being ported over to the Switch. You never know, this could happen. It's not like it's Nintendo Land and can be heavily relied on the gamepad. You could change up the controls for the Wonderful 101, but in terms of whether or not I think it's going to be ported over, I definitely lean towards the no side. The next port idea that I'm going to be talking about in this video is Xenoblade Chronicles X. When we got the announcement in 2017 of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, a brand new entry in the Xenoblade series coming to the Nintendo Switch, a lot of fans of the Xenoblade series were excited and went and purchased this console. The game ended up selling pretty well for Xenoblade standards, obviously not as big as some of the larger Nintendo franchises out there, but for this series it's doing pretty well. We got DLC for it released the next year, and then late into last year we got the announcement of Xenoblade Chronicles Remastered. This game is rumored to be coming out around May of this year, which means that we're going to be getting the original Xenoblade put on this console. So fans are wondering, you could play Xenoblade 2 and its DLC on this console, and the original one. There's only one Xenoblade game left to play on the Switch, and this is the Wii U title, Xenoblade Chronicles X. Xenoblade X is slightly different compared to the other Xenoblade titles out there. It's generally either your favorite Xenoblade game in the series or your least favorite Xenoblade game in the series, just because of how different it is. Not strikingly different, but when you have a silent protagonist, it generally hinders the story, and if that's your main reason for playing Xenoblade, you're probably not going to enjoy this one as much. But if you play Xenoblade looking for more of an open-ended exploration style of gameplay, Xenoblade X is probably the one for you. You get to fly around in giant robot suits, there's a ton of battles that you could go through, as is with all of the Xenoblade games, and it could be a very fun time to have. And because of this, and because it's the only game not ported to the Switch, and there were previous rumors of it coming to the Switch which have been publicly denied, but who knows if that's actually the truth. Because of all of this, I think that Xenoblade X is likely to be ported to the Nintendo Switch. Not this year though. I think Xenoblade X could potentially be ported in 2021. Maybe when there's an announcement of a sequel to Xenoblade X, we'll get Xenoblade X ported for those people to play that game in the meantime, and then maybe a 2022 release of the sequel to Xenoblade Chronicles X. I'm not going to come out and spoil anything, but Xenoblade X kind of ended on a cliffhanger, which would obviously lead into a sequel. So if there's a Xenoblade X2 on the Nintendo Switch, then it would make sense to be able to play the first one on the console so that more people go out and buy the sequel. Since the Wii U didn't sell as well, there's probably not as many people who played Xenoblade X as there was who played the original Xenoblade Chronicles, which released on the Wii, meaning that you're going to want as many people to play the original as possible so that they're less hesitant to go out and buy a sequel. Will this maybe cause an overload of too many Xenoblade games on the Nintendo Switch? Perhaps, but the series has been getting games on the console almost every year since the Switch's inception, so maybe the developers aren't too worried about that. The next game that's being discussed in the Nintendo community for an idea for a port on the Switch is Star Fox Zero. Star Fox is in a very interesting state when it comes to Nintendo franchises. It seems to be falling year over year in terms of sales, and there seems to be a lot of doom and gloom over the series, and a lot of speculation of whether or not the series is going to be able to continue going forward, whether Nintendo will just have to stop making new games for the series. Star Fox Zero was something they clearly put a lot of effort and sales into. It was one of their biggest showcases at E3 2014, and when it didn't blossom well sales-wise, that was considered to be one of the ending points for the Star Fox series. They tried to give it one last shot with this new release, but it didn't end up turning out so well. But then came the Star Fox DLC for Starlink Battle for Atlas, and the Star Fox series got a little bit of prominence again. The game didn't sell a ton of units, but at least it's Star Fox being showcased in a game in the modern years. This leads many Nintendo fans to speculate about whether or not Star Fox Zero could come over to the Nintendo Switch in terms of a port and try to gain more sales for the Star Fox series. In terms of this one, I'm gonna go unlikely, but I do think it's a very good idea. Despite Star Fox getting some prominence in Starlink Battle for Atlas, I still don't know how keen Nintendo would be on porting over Star Fox Zero, and potentially we'd get a new Star Fox game instead, a brand new original title. Then if that one succeeds, then maybe they consider porting over Star Fox Zero. It would be kind of a good idea to port this game over though, considering that one of the main issues with the game from a critical perspective is the control scheme. It relies a lot on the gamepad, but if you were to change that control scheme in a port, it could probably make the game a lot better. If it gets better reviews, then potentially more people will buy it, the game could potentially grow and revive the Star Fox series. That's the philosophy with a Star Fox Zero port. I just don't think that Nintendo would really want to gamble on this though. The final game, or I should say two games that I'm going to be talking about in this last entry in the video, is The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. I'm lumping these two games together as one entry on this list, considering that I believe if these games are ported over to the Switch, they'd probably both be on one cartridge, and you'd be able to play both games for one purchase. At least that would be the nice thing for Nintendo to do. They could go ahead and release the Wind Waker remake that was on Wii U as one separate entry, and then the Twilight Princess remake as another separate entry, and charge $60 for both, but I highly doubt that's what they'll do here. Considering that this is going to be the third release of the same game, if these two would be ported over to the Switch, I don't think Nintendo would want to do that, and it would probably be better for them to release both in one, and they might get more sales that way, because people feel that they're getting a better deal. Wind Waker, I see a lot more requests for to be ported over, but since Twilight Princess was remade on the Wii U as well, why wouldn't Nintendo want to port that one over? I think it would just make a lot of sense for Nintendo to put both of these titles on the Switch, considering that they're in a similar vein as they're in the same series. It's two drastically different styles of a Zelda game from an aesthetic perspective, with Twilight Princess being closer to the modern style of Zelda, and Wind Waker being more of a cel-shaded type of game. But both of them do have their different appeals, and they're still both marketed towards the same demographic. The Zelda fanbase has been going crazy with Breath of the Wild and the Link's Awakening remake. Why wouldn't they want to go and purchase a Wii U port of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess? I just think would make a ton of money for Nintendo. This is why I'm going to come out and say that these two games are likely to be ported to the Nintendo Switch. I would definitely put them in that category, especially if Breath of the Wild 2 is not releasing this year. If that's not happening, then Nintendo could potentially release the single cartridge with both of these games remade on it, and that would capitalize on people's interest in 3D Zelda for this year. Now, in terms of 3D World and Legend of Zelda Wind Waker and Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, those two port ideas, I think they're both likely, but I would think that if both of them are going to happen, one of them is going to be releasing this year and the other one won't. This would give us the option for if a 3D World port was to release, then we could potentially get Breath of the Wild 2 released this year, and if Wind Waker and Twilight Princess released this year, then we could potentially be getting a brand new 3D Mario this year. That's generally the way I see this thing going. So I believe 3 of these 6 most common ideas are likely, and 3 of them are fairly unlikely. All of them could potentially happen with the right circumstances, but from Nintendo's perspective, I think it would make a lot more sense to release 3 of these games instead of the others. There were some games I could have included in this video that some people have been talking about. I hear Pikmin 3 thrown around a lot, but it wouldn't really make sense for them to port over Pikmin 3 if they're planning on releasing Pikmin 4 relatively soon. Paper Mario Color Splash gets thrown around a bit to give it a second chance, but I really don't think Nintendo's going to want to do that. Especially with the Mario and Luigi series going down and the Mario RPG genre really needing a brand new original title as soon as possible. But let me know what you think about this. What Wii U games would you like to see ported to the Nintendo Switch, or are you just completely sick of Wii U ports and are thinking, come on Nintendo, just give us some new games? Let me know in the comment section down below, and consider subscribing and tick the bell icon if you're brand new to the channel and want to make sure you stay notified for the new uploads that are going to be coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching.